oil and gas is so diverse in the jobs and support people that I kind of want to highlight those. And
Yeah. Okay.
yes,
That's interesting.
Jason D'Souza, you're an injury, oil and gas injury attorney. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Cool. So, how did you kind of get into that profession? Have you always been interested in, you know, debate and those type of things, or was it a family business, or what's going on there?
So I was born and raised in Canada, in Toronto, and I came and went to school in Michigan. I met my wife there, and I just couldn't really deal with a whole lot of the weather anymore. And Michigan weather is a lot more severe than Toronto. They've got the whole lake effect, and they've got the peninsula going on. So I made a deal with my girlfriend, now wife at the time, and said, "Hey, can we move down south? Anywhere down south. Give me 1 to 3 years of just like year-round summer." And she was like, "Sure, no problem." And that was 2009. And when she realized in 2015 that I was going to start my own firm, she was very supportive. My wife's always been very supportive of everything I'd done, but she cried because she was like, we're not going back to Michigan." And I was like, I mean, maybe we can go back and I can have a remote and this and that. She's like, "We're not going back." And she's like, "Okay, that's okay. I married you. We're here together. We'll do this." And so I got immediately into litigation because I think I just enjoy the competition. I don't know that I enjoy debate per se or arguing per se. I think the litigation seems to be, maybe in my opinion at least, maybe the purest form of competition amongst the subcategories of law. You know, there's more competition involved in litigation than there is in, say, writing up contracts or in like title work or transactional work, buying companies, merging companies. So the competition aspect is what drew me to litigation, and then what drew me to be a trial lawyer is that it seemed to be an even higher level of competition involved, because it involves taking that case that you're competing with the insurance company on and taking it all the way through to a courtroom and trying to persuade a jury that you've got the better case, and more so that your client's deserving. So I got into that, and when I started my own, I was licensed in 2010, and when I started my own firm in 2015, I'd been working for other guys, and a lot of them took the position of, you know, they do a lot of 18-wheeler work, or they do company vehicle work, or regular car accidents, which is fine, no problem. There's good money in that. But I wanted to kind of spread my wings and see what else is out there. Um, I became an attorney because I wanted to see what I can do. So, could I do it? And I wanted to check out maybe pharmaceutical litigation a little bit, check out, other kinds of stuff, business litigation, and oil and gas was also out there. And we're in South Texas, and there's so much going on in terms of oil and gas in Texas. And in South Texas, we've got the Eagle Ford. So I said, why don't I, try that out and see how that's going? Um, and slowly, I kind of got into it more and more and more. Um, and I found that there's a real opportunity available for good trial lawyers to defend good working men and women, largely men, because it's mainly men who are in the oil field.
Yeah.
Um, but just the opportunity to defend and represent their interests. And coming from a blue collar background, my father being a machinist and my mother was an admin assistant, I know what it's like to have working parents and have blue collar parents. I know what it's like. My dad got injured in the late '80s, so I know what injuries are like and how that can derail a family life. So I kind of felt that, and I was like, that it just seems like something that I can identify with. And when I'm speaking with like these oil field workers, I understand them on a bit of a better level because I grew up in a blue collar home.
Right. You- Do people specialize in a, you said there's different types of litigation. So how do people specialize and then like, can you jump around or how long does that kind of take or what's that process look like?
Yeah, I think it's like a both. I know that there's lawyers here, and I think they just focus and when I say here in San Antonio, South Texas, Texas even, and they just focus on 18-wheeler crashes. 18, they're the truck accident guys, and
Yeah.
I think that they just decide that there are so many 18-wheelers here in Texas. There's a lot of money to be made. They want to dive deep into the business. They realize that maybe 18-wheeler crashes have less moving parts than, say, an oil and gas case. They know that the ability to market for 18-wheeler crashes is much wider. You're going to have a much, much, much bigger audience than,
Yeah.
the niche market of oil and gas. And even hiring attorneys to work for you, I think I think attorneys, plaintiff lawyers at least, getting to the second part of your question, can move easier between, say, firm A to B to C to D if they have trucking experience. Um, I think you can move. I think if you're in litigation, my opinion is I think you can move at any time. I think if somebody walked in with, say, a sexual assault employment claim in my office, I think I could represent them. I wouldn't feel necessarily comfortable, and I would certainly bring on a local counsel advisor who handles employment law. But if they were insistent on, hey, I really need you to represent me, I'd say, okay, well, I'm going to bring in somebody who knows, who works in employment law and works in the space, because at the end of the day, what you're looking to find is, can you meet the elements of your claim, right? Like whatever you submit to the jury, was there a breach of contract by this company? Was there sexual assault by your supervisor? Was there negligence while on the oil and gas site? You still have to meet your burden of proof, right? So if you know what the elements are of what you got to prove, you know where to start, like where which rocks to start picking up and which ones are red herrings, that get thrown at you.
When you say there's less mechanisms with the 18 wheelers, does that mean, are you saying that it's more clear cut in that there's somebody maybe that got in an accident, the person who was injured, and then like the insurance company versus like oil and gas, where there's the operator, the owner, there's all these contract companies. Like, what do you mean by there's, mechanisms are more streamlined, I guess?
Sure. So, in an 18-wheeler crash, you'll get company A that's driving the tractor, and they'll rear end my client, the plaintiff. So you got the tractor, you've got whoever the trailer is, um, and you're gonna also add a broker into the mix, and maybe a shipper. Maybe for example, there's company A, company B, and company A is hauling for company B, and company B has a contract with Toyota, so there's Toyota Auto Parts in there, and then there's also a broker, right? So it's a little bit more like linear. Whereas on the oil and gas side, I'll find, like what you said, there's an operator, maybe there's a vacuum truck there, they could be doing a cementing job. Maybe you've got a workover crew there. The workover crew could be doing a rod pulling job, and depending on the type of rod pulling job they're doing, I mean, are they just pulling rods or are they changing the pump out, right? And did a product fail? Did the rod cup fail? Or was the guy who was handling the block getting too rushed, right? Um, there's just so many different companies. I think oil and gas is one of those industries where you have so much cooperation between the various companies. You've got, say, Conoco out there as an operator. You've got the workover rig. You've got maybe a production guy. You've got a water guy. Um, some of these guys are just sitting. You got torque and test guys. They're all there to do the job, and they all kind of know what they're intended to do. Kind of like on a Ford plant line where they're assembling vehicles, Ford assembly line. They'll
Yeah,
know what they got to do, but when these incidents in oil and gas happen, it's somebody, hey, what's the company man doing? I don't know. He's sitting on his thumb doing nothing, sitting in the truck scrolling Facebook, but he's staring at the site though in his Ford pickup, right? Yeah, he's
yeah,
staring at the site in his Ford pickup, right? Or, is the guy is the driller, is he just moving too fast and he shouldn't be moving too fast? Or, is there a responsibility for somebody else? So there's just so many more elements involved in oil and gas. There's the engineering aspect, of course, which is also fascinating to me. So
yeah,
I think when you add all those elements into it, the average, say, 18-wheeler lawyer looks at these things and they're like, hey, man, I don't think that I'm the right guy for this. There's just too much going on. And the jury charge, for example, also looks different than a jury charge for an 18-wheeler crash. So, you can do it, but I wouldn't recommend diving headlong into it, just because it's very complex.
yeah. How many people on a, I'm sure every case is different in this oil and gas injury. How many people normally are on a case? for you?
Like in my office.
Yeah. Well, like say you're representing somebody. How many people, how much resource are you gonna typically dedicate to any given injury? Or is it just a constant mix of research and yeah.
So the way that I set my firm up, whenever people say like I'm going to start my own gig, usually they're motivated by they got fired or they're like I could do it better than the last guy, right? So I
Yeah.
didn't get fired, but I was like I could do it better than the last guy that I was working for, and I was convinced of it because I already had like the model in my head. I just needed some time to kind of like apply that model out. So the way that we do things at my firm, the traditional law firm that's working in personal injury, it'll get signed up at the firm. It'll go to a lawyer. That lawyer will have a paralegal and a case manager, maybe a law clerk, a briefing attorney, and the four of them will be on that island together, and they'll all kind of row that boat until they get to the finish line. However long that boat may take to get to the finish line, that's what they'll do. My concept was a little bit different in that we have departments that people will work in, and we in those various departments, I have, for example, two paralegals, and they just work on setting depositions. That's their sole job, and I kind of figured that if we're doing that, all those paralegals will know how to do is they'll know, you know, who the right people are to email to get depositions set. They'll know that if somebody quashes a deposition, that means they cancel our deposition that the other side set. They'll know, hey, this is how the court handles it, and this is how various courts are different, and they handle these deposition issues differently. They'll know they'll build a rapport, say, with certain lawyers at certain defense firms who show up repeatedly in our cases about how to set things and what certain preferences are. And if that's all they're doing, then we could really rocket away at setting depositions. So that group on the depositions, for example, is just one department that I have here at the firm, and they'll just work on only setting depositions and hiring experts, for example. I've got another department, and all they do, these two paralegals do, is they respond to discovery, and discovery is some of the most difficult and tedious work. But these two paralegals are phenomenal. They're very good, and that's all they do day in, day out. And so they specialize in it, and they're like, hey, I know I know that this insurance company or this company is asking for too much of our client, and they know not to produce it or to file an objection and let the lawyer handle it. Or they know, hey, look, the position that I've always taken too is I don't want to hide the ball. We're here to prove something. I'll prove everything that I've got. If I've got video of the scene, I'll produce the photos. If I've got witness statements, I'll produce the witness statements. If I've got medical, I'll produce it. Anything I've got, I send it over to the other side and I say, hey, this is what I got because I got nothing to hide, and we're gonna rock and roll in this case. So there's no point in hiding the ball or being cute about things. It's very. We've got 35 people here at the firm, and on the
Oh wow.
commercial litigation side, we've probably got about probably 25 or so. So I'd say on just about every case, you're going to get at least one of those people who's going to get a hold of it in some way and involve themselves in some way on a case.
That's quite a number of people. So what do you think is common in your experience? What are some of the common injuries that you're seeing or that you're having to represent?
You're gonna get orthopedic injuries. So you're gonna get the neck, back, knee, shoulder, ankle, wrist, elbow. I had a client who called in yesterday. Sorry, I had a client. I have one day of just client meetings where I just introduced myself to clients, talked to them for about an hour. One of those clients was working, and he broke his forearm and elbow because the rod cup came flying off and hit him because the guy operating the block was moving the rods too quickly. Um, so that's an example of one. There's another fellow, and I don't recall offhand what it was, but I think there's some sort of tubing that fell off a rack and cracked his collarbone over here.
Okay.
Um, one of my first oil and gas cases, very sad case because it was a fellow who had 5 children, and his mother hired me. And they happened to have the rig located underneath a power line, an active power line.
Yeah.
And the owner of the land was the one supervising the job because he was like a real small time well operator. He had like 3 wells in total. So he was there. He was telling these guys exactly what to do. And he said, "Hey, put the rig underneath this live power line." And so as soon as one of the rigging poles went up, he my guy had put the rigging pole up. It connected with the power line. He got thrown off the rig. Rigs are pretty high up, about 24 feet. Got thrown off, and he was dead before he hit the ground. Um, so they're so varied. I mean, we went to trial in November against the oil and gas company because a thumb got amputated in the operation of a rod cup. It was a defective rod cup. The ring had deteriorated massively, and because the ring was no good, while he was changing the rods, his thumb got caught and just sliced clean off. So they're so varied. They're so varied, Travis. They're very different, um, and it's very, in my opinion, it's very it's somewhat sad when I deal with these cases, knowing that these companies can put safety policies in effect. Um, and I think that there's a mentality, and I can never confirm this, but I think there's a mentality sometimes with some of the more careless companies that employees are disposable. And hey, he's a hand. The hand got hurt. Get rid of him. Insert another hand here. And that's, I think, what bothers me the most about this. And that's the other reason that drew me to oil and gas is that there's a lot of good working men that are being used up in the oil and gas industry. And I don't have a problem with the industry at all, but I just think that it's very unfair to these men and their families to have these really, really bad injuries, and then they're fought. They get fought by the companies when it's their fault and they should know better. They get embroiled in 2 to 3 year litigation when everybody knows off the bat, hey guys, why didn't you do another JSA? You did a morning JSA. Why didn't you do an afternoon JSA when you knew that the job was going to substantially change, right?
Yeah. Or repair equipment or whatever yeah. We've
Yeah,
seen too in the industry, I think we're kind of evolving out of that, but categorizing or what is the cost of a death of an employee, and baking that into their operation, whether they're intending to do it or not. I'm assuming that they're not intending to, kill people on an annual basis, but that is something that, I think in the past companies have looked at, having that number instead of just saying we're going to keep all of our employees safe, kind of no matter the cost. When you're a smaller operator, I mean, all that stuff drives your bottom line. So I definitely, not that it's right, but you definitely understand people's motivation to take shortcuts and everything. But then
I
again,
agree with that 100%.
but if you're if you don't have the money and the resources to do it right, should you even be in the business in the first place? I don't know.
And I'll just qualify what you just said. It's not even the smaller operators. You would be, I'm sure but some of your listeners might be surprised or maybe not surprised. It's all the way up to the super majors that are doing that type of thing, trying to save pennies on jobs where they should know better. You know, their stock prices move more in a day than the amount of money they're trying to save on the site.
Yeah. What's the most surprising thing that when people come in about the legal system that they didn't understand?
I think it's always the length of time.
How
I
long
think
are
it's all
some of these cases taking potentially? Are we talking like with the finger accident that you were talking about? Is that, is it 2 years or is it a year? Or kind of give us a feel of what that kind of process timeline looks like.
sure, sure. I think that because I've been involved in litigation from the start, one of the things that happened, and we're still feeling the reverberations of COVID in every industry, but the courtrooms in Bexar County, which is where San Antonio is in Bexar County, it was shut down for 2.5 years. And courtrooms across the state were shut down for 2.5 years. And while that was happening, people were still being injured, crashes were still happening, businesses were still suing each other, people were still getting divorced, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the courtroom was on pause and the courtroom was closed down. And we're still feeling the impact of that because cases that may have been signed during that time and then filed during that time, we're now dealing with the backlash of, the courts now have double the backlog. And then even now, cases that maybe I signed in 2023, um, those cases are still having to deal with the backlog of what's behind them. So typically, I think somebody will come in, and then there's also the period of time where somebody will get medical treatment. I mean, if you've got casing or tubing that's going to land on your clavicle and crack it, and a doctor finds that, well, for one, you've got a fractured clavicle, but for two, your neck is completely messed up now, there's going to be a period of time for which you'll need medical treatment. And um, you've also got to get in line for all and get that medical treatment that's needed, because if you want to get yourself back out there and work and get things taken care of, it's all good. Dad hugs are all good.
We're second day of school. We're we're doing this before we take them to school.
Hey man,
It happens every time.
eventually they stopped doing that, which is what really kind of. I've got a 12 and 11-year-old, and now like the random hugs have stopped, and it's like, oh man, I kind of miss that.
Yeah, maybe a side hug or a fist bump. That's all you're getting.
Right, right, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Um, but but generally speaking, I think it's going to take somewhere between 2 and 4 years for these cases to get moved. If you've got a serious injury and there's serious compensation that's involved, there's a lot of depositions to take. There's a lot of root cause analysis to figure out. And 2 to 4 years, I know, sounds like an extremely long time. I mean, 4 years is a college
yeah,
degree, right?
yeah,
Um, I always ask people to think of, just a couple years ago is 2023, 4 years ago is 2021. Time tends to generally move quickly. And if you are in good hands with a good lawyer, we send out email correspondences every 2 weeks telling people what happened with their case. So if a case is going to take, 2 years, you're going to get, what is that? You're going to get 104, not 104, you're going to get 52 emails from us. Every 2 weeks you're going to get an email. We'll tell you exactly what we've done in the last 2 weeks. I've got a policy in my office where every single case has to be touched every 2 weeks. A new update has to go out to the client every 2 weeks. Something must happen, because I think that if our firm is touching the case 26 times a year, and my opponent is touching the case once a quarter, I mean, we're going to hammer them. We're going to hammer them. We're going to hit them hard. And if we're touching the case 52 times over 2 years, and again, they're still only touching the case once a quarter, uh, you know, you'll know who the better lawyers are from the result.
yeah. That is quite a long period of time. I can see where a lot of people are getting antsy and wondering about how things are progressing. So that makes a lot of sense that you're communicating with them, as frequently as you are. What are some misconceptions workers have about their rights and protections?
Oilfield workers are first and foremost afraid that they're going to be blackballed. The number one threat made to an oilfield worker is that, number one, you're going to screw up our safety bonus. You file a report or a claim with workers' comp, even forget about hiring a lawyer, you're going to screw up our safety bonus on the crew. Don't be that guy. Number two, even if you do go file a claim, you'll never work in this business again. We're going to call every single company, and we're going to make sure that you never work again. You're a guy with a 10th grade education making, 75, 100 grand a year. I mean, that's a credible threat. That's a real threat that many, many people take seriously. And it's a misconception because, for one, it's illegal to make that threat. But how am I ever going to prove it? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you know. It matters what you can prove, right? So how am I ever going to prove it? But number two, I tell these guys, I say, hey, look, do you think it's easy to find people to get out there and work in the 130-degree Midland heat doing a pump change? You think you can just go find some random guy in the street who's going to do that job, even for 75 or 100 grand a year? Forget it. You think you can find people to go to Alaska and work on the North Slope in like the freezing cold temperatures? It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. These companies, at the end of the day, they got to get this stuff out of the ground, and they need good, experienced, loyal workers. And if they don't treat you right, then you have every right to file a claim. And if it's a different company that was on site that caused your injury, if it was the torque and test guy, if it was, the company man, if it was somebody else who caused that injury, you have every right to get compensation and hire a lawyer. You have every right. And lawyers like myself, we work on a contingency. We only collect if we win, or if we only charge a fee and recover expenses if we collect money on a case. And if we don't, then you're not going to get a monthly bill from us. You're not going to have to pay anything. It's if we don't win, then you don't pay. Simple as that.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I'm sure that's the other thing people are thinking is like they're hurt. Now they have to get someone to represent them. Maybe they're already strapped for cash, and how are they going to afford it? If someone does get injured, what would you recommend their process be for, I'm sure there's some things you would want to say to the company that you're working for or the company you're not working for. What should an employee that's injured, what should their first action be?
First thing you got to do is get to the hospital. And I know that seems like the obvious statement, but the first thing the company's going to want you to do is get tested. Are you dirty or are you clean? They're going to want to know that,
Yeah,
right? They don't care whether you get to the hospital or not. I mean, like, you could have your arm hanging out, or you could have your one arm in one hand and your arm severed. They're going to want to know, hey, are you dirty or are you clean, right? Do you have drugs in your system or not? You got to get to the hospital. Don't worry about going to Concentra. Don't worry about the urgent care. Don't worry about all that stuff. You get yourself that medical treatment because your body matters. Okay, and that's the number one thing. Second thing is the next thing is the company's going to want to talk to you. They're going to get either the VP, or they're going to get the safety man, or they're going to get the HR rep, and they're going to say, "Hey, we want to have a discussion with you about what happened. We want to figure out what happened. We need you to talk to us." And sometimes some of the more unethical companies, which is highly illegal, is they'll try to hold your pay, and they'll say, "Hey, we really need you to talk to us, and if you don't talk to us, I don't know if we can get you paid." If you're in Texas, that's actionable, and you can contact. I cannot remember the name, but there is a state agency that you can contact if your employer withholds your pay for any reason. For any reason,
the like
whether it's
Department of Labor or something.
it's something like that. It's the people who handle unemployment. Whatever is the agency in Texas that handles unemployment. I run my own firm, so I'm not contacting these guys. But whoever it is that you would file an unemployment claim with, you contact those guys, and they will get involved immediately. They're very aggressive. They do not like companies that withhold pay. And the third thing that I would say is, and it sounds fairly, it sounds uh, unusual to say this, but the third person that you got to make sure you do not speak to is OSHA. Um, and I know the government may not like me saying it, but I'm going to be honest with you though, Travis. OSHA is going to show up, and their sole goal, they've got a OSHA has a I guess they'll call it a dictate. They've got a directive, and that directive is to blame your company. So you're going to show up and you're going to say, "Hey, I work for Travis's Oilfield Services, and I broke my leg on site." And they're going to say, "Okay, talk to us. Tell us what's going on." And then they're going to write the report in such a way that Travis's Oilfield Services gets fined. And the fact of the matter is that it could have been the operator, it could have been a torquing test, it could have been a piece of equipment, it could have been an employee of another company, it could have been the water guy, it could have been the vacuum services truck, it could have been anything. But as soon as you talk to OSHA, what's happening is they're going to tag your employer. And once they put it in writing that, hey, it's your employer's fault, when in fact it could be somebody else's fault, very clearly somebody else's fault, now there's a document saying that it's your employer's fault. And why not just get taken care of at the hospital, go talk to a lawyer? Because if you tell a lawyer something, I'm going to listen to what you're saying, and I'm going to figure out, hey, who are all the players that are on site? Because if it's clearly somebody else's fault, maybe the CO2 went out, and that's why you weren't able to tell that there was an H2S leak, right? Because your H2S sensor went out. Well, that's an equipment malfunction, or maybe the company that rented it to you didn't know that. So I'd say those two things: go to the hospital, don't talk to your company, and don't talk to OSHA. I think that's taking care of yourself first and foremost, and that's the most important thing to do. And then after that, take some time, decide if you want to talk to a lawyer. If you don't, no problem, but at least take some time for yourself.
Why, why, why do you think it is that, uh, in your opinion, OSHA's targeting or maybe targeting is not the right word, but is always going to place blame on the employer.
That's a good question. I think that's how the department is set up. I think that that's how the investigators are trained. All this is speculation, so I have no idea. I'm sure an
Yeah,
OSHA inspector will correct me very forcefully in the future, and I'll still maintain my opinion, but that's okay. We can have a difference of opinion.
right.
Um, I just think that that's how the department is set up. I think that, if you're working, ironically, OSHA recognizes the multi-employer scenario, where you have a controlling employer, but you also have other types of employers on a site, right? In the construction scenario. But I don't know. I think that that's just how it's set up, and I think that that's how the bureaucracy is intended to work. And I think that because of that, they're able to move, open and close files much faster in that manner.
I mean, this is your experience giving you that opinion, correct?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
yeah,
I just kind of want to be, you know, so people understand where that's coming from. You're not making that opinion up in a vacuum. That's, your experience.
sure, sure. And I think the OSHA investigators and inspectors that I've worked with are very cordial. They're very civil. They're very professional. They're very respectful. They're very much in the workers' corner. Um, I just think that the problem with OSHA reports is that they will always blame the employer. And then you go and hire a lawyer, and the first thing the operator's lawyer is going to say is, I got an OSHA report that says your employer's at fault. And now you're pointing the finger at the company man for the operator? I mean, you're already behind the eight ball at that point. It's almost game over.
Yeah, you already have documentation saying that it's somebody's fault, so now you got to fight your way out of the corner.
Exactly. Exactly.
When you say employees get injured, go to the hospital, and then they take uh, a drug test, does that disqualify them from any like representation or fault or ability? Like, what are we saying when what is the importance of an employee being dirty and the consequences of that on the injury that they have from a legal
Um,
standpoint?
sure. So what I found is that truck drivers seem to like meth, and oil field workers seem to like cocaine. Um, Wherever the truckers get the meth from, I don't know. But what I'll tell you is the cocaine on the oil field site, the companies are well aware of it. They know what's going on. They're intentionally turning a blind eye to the cocaine on site. Um, so we start there. We start with an injured worker who has cocaine in his system, right? And he's already gone to Concentra, and he's dirty, and he's got
What's
it in his urine.
Concentra? Is that a drug
Concentra
testing
is
service?
Yeah, they're kind of like an urgent care here in town, but they're more geared to doing employer-based drug tests and employer urgent care type thing, and that type of thing. And they're a very good organization. I'm using their name just kind of because they have such a recognizable brand. They're very good at what they do. I like them very much. But people here in Texas tend to recognize that. Oh, you went to Concentra, and at that location, at that urgent care is where they'll do the drug test.
Okay.
Um, so for me, it doesn't. If somebody is dirty and they've got something in their system, the real question becomes how long has it been in their system for? Because the metabolites will remain in your system for up to 3 days. So the question is, has the cocaine metabolized by the time the injury happened? Meaning like, did you do cocaine 14 hours ago, um, and now 14 hours later, you're injured and it's still in your system? Um, but it will disqualify you from workers' comp benefits. So if you do have an illegal drug in your system, you will be disqualified as a worker from workers' comp benefits. Um, as a lawyer, I have taken numerous cases, and to me, it's not of any real. It's obviously concerning to me, but at the same time, I have expert witnesses who are able to determine from the results and from the Concentra file or the urgent cares file how long it's been in the system for. And if it's been in the system for not a very for a very long period of time, It's still going to show up, but we know it's going to be metabolized and it's not going to be active. That's all I mean by metabolized. It's going to
Yeah,
show up in your system.
were we high
Yeah,
at work or were we partying off the job?
exactly. Did you smoke pot 10 days ago and now you haven't smoked it for the past 10 days? That didn't affect the reason you got injured.
Yeah. So even though let's say that they are high on the job, they get injured, we're still going to look for the mechanism of injury, even if it's not the employee's fault, and that still is a pathway that we go down. Or if they're high and they get injured, does it like immediately disqual them from anything? Like if it's a tool breaks or malfunctions, well, that's not the employee's fault that potentially it broke and he got hurt, even if he is high and got injured.
Oftentimes I bring up that the employer looks the other way. They know, for example, that maybe the driller is making some money on the side selling on the job. And the employer is well aware that this has been going on and chooses to turn a blind eye to it. And when they're turning that blind eye to it, they clearly have no problem with the crew being high or the crew buying, these drugs because the job's getting done. So if we establish that in some way through witness testimony that they know that, say, Carlos has been selling for the past 3 years, and they've all been on the same crew for the past 3 years. Well, they've been getting the job done for the past 3 years, right? So it doesn't seem like the drugs really had anything to do at all with this injury. It looks like there was something else that you add to the mix now that caused this injury to happen. The counterpoint to that, of course, is, well, yeah, you can drive drunk for 3 years until you crash into somebody, and the alcohol is the reason you crashed into somebody. So I'd say there's a and counterpoint to drugs in a worker system. I will just say that it's not something that scares me off on a case.
Yeah, and I think, not that that's a positive thing, but just that awareness for people, like you said, you're not trying to hold the ball and, hide it or anything. That if somebody is high at work and they get injured, I mean, that's still something potentially that they can take to an attorney.
Sure, sure. And I think that if there's enough liability, um, meaning fault on third party companies, and it's fairly clear about what happened, I mean, a good lawyer is going to be able to fight it. You know.
Are there any, so we kind of talked about on the employee side, do you represent the companies on these as well? And are there any mistakes that you see on the company side?
I do not represent companies. I don't want to represent companies, and I have no intention in the future to represent companies. Not because I have anything against them, it's just that this is the side that I'm on. This is my team, and this is the team that I play for. Um, so, I mean, I think that companies they create this. I guess they'll call it like a mirage. Like you're in the desert and you see water, and what they tend to do is they tend to tell employees and themselves that everybody always has stop work authority, right? And they'll say, "Hey, look, this guy knew that this dangerous activity was happening, and he should have just called for stop work. Just use the magic words and stop work. And as soon as you stop work, everybody on the job is going to stop work." Okay, yes, in theory, you are correct, sir. Had had the employee called out for stop work, then the injury would not have happened. However, the reality of the situation is, as soon as you call out for stop work in the oil field, you're labeled a troublemaker or weak, and B, you're invited to go home and not invited to return again. Stop work is all well and good in theory, but as soon as it gets used, it tends to upset quite a number of people, starting from the company man and the engineer all the way on down to the hand. And people just see it as somebody causing trouble. And so if the company actually allowed their workers to stop work, you know, I'll give you the example of Toyota. Toyota changed assembly lines in North America and globally because General Motors and the big three, what they used to do is they would say, no, we can't stop the line for any reason. Vehicles need to move down the line, move down the line. Do not pull the cord and bring them down the line. Well, the result was subpar vehicles from the domestic manufacturers. Toyota said, no, you could pull that. Pull it. Let's stop it for, a minute and let's correct the actual problem down the line. You're going to be fine. Your job's going to be safe. The supervisor's not going to yell at you. You're not going to be terminated. You're not going to be penalized. But let's build the best quality vehicle we can, and then let's keep the line moving. And I mean, we all know the end result of that. Toyota's the best, in my opinion, one of the best manufacturers in the world. I don't drive a Toyota, but they dominate the market, and it just is what it is. And they decided that stop work was good and okay and not wrong. And I think that if employers actually adopted that, what they say, didn't just give it lip service, you'd have a better culture, you'd have a safer culture, you'd get a better product, you'd get less injuries, you'd have people who could stop and think for a moment. Just stop and think, man. Just take a second, right? Are we doing it the best way? How long will it take to, get a replacement part? Can we stop for 2 hours? I mean, what is the best way to do things? I think there's a lot of rush in the oil game to get that oil out of the ground as fast as they can and get it upstream and get paid on what comes out of the ground and the per barrel rate. Um, and and I think the fear is, hey man, if we don't get paid now, there's going to be a crash. They're going to crash the global oil markets. You remember the crash of 2014? We all got laid off. Let's get it out, get it out, get it out, make it happen as quick as possible. And it doesn't need to be that way. You could just slow down just a little bit more, um, and do things the right way. And that's what I would. That's what I would. If I represented companies, which I don't, I would say, um, just use stop work. Not a big deal. Just use stop work and get the safest thing done possible. It's okay.
Yeah, sometimes rushing, and I just wrote this down, speeding, because how many times do you speed, you pass somebody, and you get there like a minute sooner, or
Yeah,
you meet them at the next, stoplight or something. So some of this rushing, is it's a pressure that we put on ourselves to just keep going, keep going, keep going. And yeah, just taking that stop work authority is really important.
sure. And I'll just add, my firm, I have a company vehicle, and I've got one main employee who drives, and I never ever rush him, ever. If he's coming in from South Texas 2 hours away, and I'm like, hey, we've got this client's got to be here at 11. He's like, Jason, it's 10 o'clock. I'm at least 90 minutes out. No problem. We'll reschedule, man. Whatever's got to work. You just take it easy. You just take your time. You don't rush. Just take whatever time. And he loves listening to football on the radio. And I say, just turn the football channel on, man. I know it's August, but how about them Cowboys? Just take it easy. You know.
Right. Is there anything else that you see uh, culture-wise that potentially we could change? Just not kind of from an outsider's perspective, what cultural issues inside oil and gas do you see are potential um, things to change or look at?
I tend to hear a lot of bullying in from guys who hire me. For example, like the Derrick man will talk about how his supervisor would bully him on the site. There tends to be a lot of this seniority machismo type thing. You see a lot in factories also. Like I said, my dad was a machinist, so he worked in a factory. In high school, I would work in factories, his factory and some of his customers' factories. And I think there's a lot of that kind of, I've been here, you're a rookie, or you're new, or you've been here for less time than me. I know how to do this faster, better, cheaper, get the bonus. And if you can't keep up with me, that's too bad. And we're just going to get going. I don't care how fast the block is moving. What do you mean you need to use this proper tool to do it? We're going to use, we don't need a scissor lift to do this. We'll do it this way. I think, and I think that that's the result of like a culture of men, right? I get it. Like that's how men are, right? Like
Yeah.
you go to a bar, you're drinking with your buddies, and what do you mean you don't want another shot? We're all doing a shot, man. Come on, right? Like don't be that guy. And it's like it's cool, man. Just take it easy. You're not soft. if you do things the right way. You're not soft if you just take a second to do it. Like, I know it's real hot outside. I know y'all have been working hard since 6 in the morning. I know you're doing, you're in the middle of a, 14-day hitch. I get it. I get it. But I think that if the bullying um, is no longer rewarded, then I think that in the oil and gas field, I think it'll just be a better culture for everyone. Nobody really likes being bullied, and the people who see the bullying, they're being bullied by extension because they don't want to be in this guy's crosshairs. So they're like, hey, I'm just going to go along with it because this guy is just pushing everyone around. Well, the problem is with the guy that's pushing everybody around, eventually push comes to shove and something bad happens, right? It
So it's
happens
more
in
of a
the hospital.
leadership. It's a leadership issue.
Absolutely, absolutely. It happens in the hospital setting too. I mean, you've got surgeons who are the old school surgeons, and they're God gifted them with the hand of God. And if you don't know how to cut the way I know how to cut, and you're the new school and you're soft and you're one of these millennials or Gen Z types or blah blah blah, it's like, hey man, just you got to modify. You've got to have good leadership. Just because, I mean, Phil, who was Jordan's coach? Phil, I just scared it
Yeah,
out of you, right?
yeah.
Yeah. You know, it, I look at some of these coaches, right, and they've got championship after championship after championship. Derek Jeter, I mean, he was the leader on the Yankees in the '90s, right? And he must have been a very good leader because people responded to him. Kobe, another great leader. Um, Pop in San Antonio, another great leader. Um, I don't think that great leaders demean or belittle. I think they bring the best out of their people. And I don't think you need to demean or belittle or bully somebody to get the best out of somebody. I think you get the worst out of somebody. And hiring good people and bringing them around and just kind of teaching them. And culture, culture always comes from the top, right? So if you're hey man, if you're a bad person and you think that hiring more bad people beneath you, things are not going to get better. They're going to get worse.
Yeah. Yeah, that might be your red flag too to stay working on that rig or start looking for another one. You see,
Sure,
the culture. Yeah, if you
absolutely,
can. I mean, sometimes you can't, and like you said, you gotta work through it, or heaven forbid, you gotta go along with it. But that might be your first clue.
absolutely, absolutely.
When we talked about these injuries, what I have documentation wrote down here. What should employees have reasonable access to? Like, is that you requesting files on their behalf, or is the employee going to be requesting files, or like, yeah, well, I guess we'll go with that.
And you're talking about after somebody hires me?
Like if they're injured, yeah, and they hire you, or maybe they're just trying to they haven't hired you yet, but they want to get like documents together. What should they expect to have access to?
Nothing. They
Okay.
get you're dealing with a situation where, let's say you got four companies on a site. Really, they'll, apart from their business contracts and their JOCs, JOAs, joint operating agreements, and the lease agreements and that type of thing, they'll have an MSA, a master service agreement between them. Excuse me. And all the master service agreement will do is talk about who indemnifies who in the event of injury or a breach. Um, but apart from that, if you work for Jason's company, I can't get access to Travis's files because we're two separate businesses.
Hmm.
It might be my employee who's doing work for Travis, but you're going to turn around and say, "Sorry, buddy, you're not going to get it absent a subpoena. You can't just get documents from my office," and vice versa. Because if you sent me a letter without a court order saying, "Hey, I need to get the following documents about this lease," I'd say you're not going to get it. It's not going to happen. It's all proprietary anyway. So if you got a court order, go get a court order. So um, the only real thing that workers have access to is their medical. Um, and I think it's important to know that because that's really a big deal. That's what's theirs. The company does not get access to your medical. Even if you went to an urgent care, even if you went to the workers' comp doctors, that does not mean that the company gets access to your medical. You own your medical. And if you don't want to disclose it to the company, You have no reason to disclose it to the company. Now the company can turn around and say, well, hey, look, we want an independent evaluation done on you, an independent medical exam done on you to clear you to come back to work. And again, that's your decision. If you're like, I think I've had enough of you guys, and I'm going to go my separate ways, that's your right. If you want to disclose it to them, that's your right. If you want to hold off while you continue to get treatment, that, say, if you've got a head injury and you're still not quite right, and you don't want them to know it, again, that's your right. So those are your documents and your things. And you walk into my office, you could sign a contract with me, sign a HIPAA. I can get those documents from all those medical providers right away.
And then we're gonna go into probably some sort of investigation, say you're brought on board, and then we're gonna go into site investigation and all that.
Well, the first thing I want to know is what site it was. Where did it happen? What's the name of the lease? What's the location? Sometimes they don't even know that, so I'll say, okay, well, how are you getting there? They'll say, well, I would get picked up in the crew truck, and I'd say, okay, well, let's look at your location services, so I can figure out the site that it happened at. Once I figure out the site it happened at, I've got various software to figure out and various public information to figure out who the lease was given to and which companies are working on those leases. So at least from there, I can say, well, let me get these companies my letter of representation, so they know there's now a lawyer involved, and they know on top of that, if it's still a continuing site, I want to get access to it. If something really bad happened, there was an explosion or something, I need immediate access to it because I got to figure out what went down. Um, on top of which, you're going to get, if you have real bad oil and gas cases or numerous fatalities or injuries, you're going to get OSHA involved. You're going to get the Chemical Safety Board involved. You're going to get, in Texas, you could get the TCEQ involved, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, them involved. You could get various state agencies involved, the Railroad Commission, they'll get involved. Um, I mean, at that point, it's like, hey guys, game over. Shut it down because this site is not going to be active for at least a month while the investigations are occurring.
Yeah, so an employee shouldn't feel frustrated if they're trying to get documents after the fact, because they shouldn't have any expectation that they're going to be given anything after an
They're
injury.
they're not. I mean, you should have the expectation that you're going to get as many documents after an injury that as you got before when you showed up to that site, which is none. The company man, the engineer, they're not sharing things with you. They're not sharing the blueprints with you, the leases, the JOAs, the MSAs. They're sharing nothing with you. You showed up, you got to assemble the rig, or the rig's already assembled, and you've just got a job to do. So, I you've got to trust that I think that's where a skilled lawyer comes into place, is that you got to ask, hey guy, what kind of experience do you have in going after this kind of company, right? Or what kind of experience do you have with this type of incident? When you describe what happened, like, did gas bubble up out of the cellar and then cause an explosion, throwing me to the cellar wall? Have you had a case like that before? Does that sound familiar to you? Is this something that you could handle? What are you going to get from me to prove that, it was a cementing company, for example, that screwed up that job, right? Um, if you walk into just anybody's office, if you walk into a lawyer's office who handles, criminal defense and family law and probate and some personal injury, and they're just not equipped, like, you get cancer, you're not going to get treatment from your family doctor. Not going to happen. You know, you're going to go to the guy who knows how to handle. You got kidney cancer, you go to the guy that knows how to specifically handle kidney cancer because that's your dude.
So you're telling people to find a lawyer this is their practice.
And they've done it before, and they've recovered before, and they know who the players are, and they know who's going to show up, and they can predict the actions of the other side. They can predict the lawyers' actions for the oil companies, and they can predict the actions of the oil companies themselves, because from my perspective, everything comes out of a textbook. So you're gonna get a textbook response from the insurance defense lawyers, and you're gonna get a textbook response from the oil companies. And if you don't know what that textbook looks like, or your lawyer doesn't know what that textbook looks like, well, you're gonna be in for. It's gonna be a frustrating time because the ball is not gonna get moved forward on that field.
How much, I'm curious now that you're talking about all this, how much education do you do for yourself to understand oil and gas operations? Like you said, the different drilling techniques, the different pipe and employees, and how much of that do you do yourself? And are you potentially like, do you bring experts in to brief you and those type of things?
So both. So we're bringing experts in on every single oil and gas case. We're going to bring in an engineer. We're going to bring in a company man expert. We're going to bring in a safety man expert. We're going to depose all the various guys that are going to be on the site. We're going to I've got people who there's a difference between like a testifying expert and a consulting expert. So a testifying expert is going to, look into the case, get the information, and then testify in front of the jury. A consulting expert is a guy that's going to educate me that the other side doesn't even know about. So I won't even disclose that guy because I don't have to. And that guy will educate me. So, you know, we're hiring those types of people on every single case. But on top of that, I mean, I'm reading all the depositions that my lawyers are taking. I'm talking to the lawyers who are on these oil and gas cases, and I'm pushing them. And I'm pushing them in a way that might be in a direction that's outside of their comfort zone. Obviously, nothing unethical, but in a direction that's outside of their comfort zone. But I'm also pushing them in a direction of take this case to trial. Don't back off. Don't try to posture it for settlement. Take this case to trial. Because you take this case to trial, you're going to find a lot more skeletons than the lawyer who doesn't take the case to trial and just tries to rattle a cage for a settlement. The difference between a guy that rattles a cage and a guy that takes them to trial is the guy that finds the real evidence, you know? And so that's how I'm educating myself. We also have an in-house engineer at my office. He's got an aerospace background, so he worked for one of the big commercial airlines, um, and he helps educate me too. So he'll write reports in office, and he'll help get us a greater understanding from an engineering perspective of what's going on that site and what caused the failure. So from a very, very early time in the case, we've got our engineer working on what's going on. We've got our investigator working on who the players are and what happened. And then we've got the lawyers who are on there starting to put together their own analysis of the case and how we can bring it to a successful trial verdict.
You said you want to go to trial. Is that always the case, or uh, is there kind of just a best outcome for each scenario? Like sometimes is it settlement versus going to trial, or your hard and fast rule in a sense is like you said, let's go to trial, let's do some more discovery in front of the court.
Every lawyer is bound by doing what's in the best interest of their client. So regardless of, while we prepare every case to go to trial. We take every deposition that's necessary. We hire all the necessary experts. Whatever medical treatment our client needs, our client will, we support their decision in getting whatever medical they need. Um, but I think that if your case is prepared to go to trial, then you will get the best outcome for your client. Which sounds intuitive. It sounds like, well, yeah, that's how it's supposed to work, right, Jason?
Yeah.
A lot of things are supposed to work that way, but the problem is that when you get these settlement lawyers involved who just decide that they want to do whatever they can do to hustle a company out of paying as much money as quickly as possible, there's a difference between the two types of lawyers, right? One's a hustler and one's a trial lawyer, and sometimes the difference is hard to spot.
Yeah, so you're saying you're prepared for the best outcome, which is the trial in your opinion. And then if you fall somewhere before that, or if it takes a different route, that's okay potentially.
Travis, could you say that again? I kind of missed that part.
So you're saying you're kind of preparing for, in a sense, the worst case scenario, which would be the trial, and then you're working your way backwards if there is a something else that happens.
Sure. Yeah. I think no one wants to go to war, and I think a client's for both sides. I think from the defendant's perspective and a plaintiff's perspective, resolution is always best. You always want to resolve problems for people. I think the defense lawyers and myself, we share that in that they want to resolve this issue for their clients as well. They know that their clients, who are the oil companies, have gotten themselves into a problem. I know that my client has gotten himself into a problem, an injury problem, and eventually we're trying to figure out what happened so that we can put people in the best place, as close as possible to where they were before the injury happened, as best we can, as best we
Yeah.
can. And I compliment my friends, my defense lawyer friends on the other side, because I think oftentimes they do a thankless job. Because the plaintiff lawyers, we tend to take all of the glory for ourselves because that's the nature of our business. But a lot of times it's defense lawyers who are doing their best to advise their clients of the risk of dealing with a skilled lawyer and advising their client that it's in their best interest to settle a case.
Yeah. When you talk about these experts that are counseling you or ones that may go to trial with you, I just think of people that have industry experience, and if they, how would you find these people? And if someone is qualified, how might they go about being part of these trials or litigation if that's something they're interested in potentially participating in?
Sure. So there's a company that I use called Expert Institute. That's one of the places that we find experts at. Another place we find experts at is we just go online and Google it. Um, but there's also another company that's called, of course, I can't remember it right now, but they're a technical expert company, a technical expert service company.
So kind of like
So
an agency or something potentially.
yes, and I think that that company may take a percentage of the expert's fees when they get retained. Expert Institute, what they do is they'll say, okay, well, hey, this oil field engineer expert goes for 495 an hour. Jason, we'll charge you 2,500 to successfully connect with the right expert. And then once I get that expert, I pay the full 495 an hour. There's other places where they'll say, okay, well, you charge 495, we're going to take 5 to 10% of your hourly, or we're going to take $100 an hour or something like that. So I think if you just connect with Expert Institute, or you just go online and if you and you act as if you were me, I'm looking for a company man expert witness, and then you'll see a bunch of different companies, expert finding companies, and you just contact them. You say, hey, here's my CV, because you'll always need a CV, and then you'll say, here's my testifying list. If you've never done it before, you obviously won't have a testifying list, but step one is get a CV ready. And CVs nowadays it just sounds complicated, but they're very
What is
easy.
a CV?
A CV stands for curriculum vitae, and all it is just a fancy resume. And it just
Oh,
talks about
okay.
your education, knowledge, training, experience on, a 1 to 2 to 3 page document. Who'd you work for? Where'd you go to school? What's your relevant experience? What's your pertinent experience to this? And why should we hire you? And that's all it is. It's just a CV is just a longer form resume. That's all it is. And you take
Gotcha.
that and you submit it to these expert companies. And you say, all right, well, somebody needs a pumper gauger expert, call me. Somebody needs a trucking expert, call me. Somebody needs a flooring expert, call me. And then you just kind of go from there, you know?
Yeah, it just seemed kind of an out of the box thing that if people are in, like I said, in this industry that have those qualifications, something that they might not have thought about. Maybe they're doing it inside of a company, but if they're now not working for that company, they're being a consultant, this could be something they could do as well.
Sure, sure. And I've got a company man that consults for me. He's always slammed. He's always on location. He's always busy, but he always makes time for my calls. Always. And he always makes a point to tell me how busy he is in the moment, and and but
He's
he's always
hooked
got
up.
time for me. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
right. Well, we're all hooked up when someone calls, so
Right, right,
I'm busy, boss.
right, right. So it's great. And then every time he talks to me, if we talk for like 30 minutes, I'll be like, all right, man, hey, I appreciate your time, and then a check will go out in the mail to him at some point. So I appreciate him always taking my calls, and I'm sure he appreciates cashing my checks. you know?
It's mutual.
Right, right.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I have, um, I mean, any more pressing questions, or, I mean, I think we've done a really good job at kind of giving everyone a broad scope of what they can do and how they should, think about if they get injured, what the next steps may, and, of course, when to get a lawyer involved. Is there anything that you think that we missed that you want to cover, and then you can tell people how to reach out to you, or
Um, I, uh, I, we charge no fees and no expenses. We advance the costs of litigation. We work with various funding banks for people who are injured or lost their jobs. Um, I just want people to know, workers to know that um, the lawyers are on your side. Um, and the main rule that I always give people, which is what one of my first paralegal taught me was, hey, lie to your friends, not to your lawyer. So, just be truthful with your lawyer. It doesn't matter what the truth is. It doesn't matter what the truth is, but just be truthful with your lawyer and tell them everything and tell them what you've got and what you know and what happened and all of it. And I mean, look, if you had something in your system, it is what it is. The problem always becomes if you make something up because you're afraid, um, that will always kind of go south pretty quick. Um, and a lawyer myself, if it's happened less than a handful of times in my career. If I find somebody who has lied to me or misrepresented to me, I'm immediately off their case, like instantly. I'm not going to deal with it. I'm not going to give any reasons for why I've left. I'm just going to, as soon as I find out that it's something egregious, not like, my memory is kind of hazy and, maybe my day started at 6 a.m. or maybe it started at 6 p.m. I don't know, or something like that. But something fairly egregious, just be honest with your lawyer, no matter what. And even if you're on the company side, be honest with your lawyer. Don't make it up with your lawyer on the company side. The guy who's defending you, you want to be honest with those guys. You want to tell them the truth. You want to make sure because both sides are going at each other hard. So even the defense side is going at the plaintiff hard, and if the plaintiff has lied, that defense side is going to find out, and then they're going to throw it in my face. And similarly, I'm going to go at the company hard, and I'm going to find everything. And so if you're honest on both sides with whoever your lawyer is, just tell the truth, and they'll be fine with it. They don't. It's already done, right? It's already done. Be better in the future, but whatever's happened, it's already happened, and let your lawyer be equipped. Don't let your lawyer get embarrassed because they're just not going to like it. Um, so that's the best thing I could say. And maybe my last thought is hey man, just be patient with the people who are working for you. You know, from a company side, be patient with your workers. From a worker side, be patient with the supervisors. Understand that they're dealing with a lot of stress. There's a reason that maybe they are the way they are. Maybe they're wound up for a reason. And they're not trying to get on you for something bad. They're just dealing with some things that are going on, and they're dealing with stuff from head office. That from Houston. And there's a lot of pressure coming out of Houston. So that's what I would say. I think if we have a better understanding of each other, maybe we could be safer, and maybe we could kind of go about things a little bit better, where people aren't getting injured and things are happening in a better way.
you mentioned kind of briefly there, and I'm just thinking about potentially the money and different things. Are there resources for people that can't like need to be represented but can't afford it?
Like on the defense side or on the plaintiff side?
On the plaintiff side, I mean, I know you're saying that like you don't get paid unless you win, but um, I could see where there's different organizations, different funds and stuff out there that might like provide support to workers. Is that something you've heard of, or is that something that's common?
I know that in Texas we have something called the Crime Victims Fund. So if, for example, something bad happened, in my experience, Crime Victims Fund tends to get used for plaintiffs most often in the case of drunk driving fatalities and injuries. Um, so somebody will contact the state and they'll say, "Hey, how do I get a hold of the Crime Victims Fund? I was a victim of a crime and I became injured, or my family member was killed as a result of this crime." So they got Crime Victims Fund. I'm not personally aware of any other resources on the plaintiff side. Um, I know on the defense side, if you've got insurance, your insurance company is required to tender you a defense. Um, every now and then, you will get a scenario of an insurance company who's going to say, "No, we're not going to cover them," because there's certain language in the policy where now this incident happens. So let's say I've got a case where there's a leak underground, and the pipe started leaking, and there's a clause in the insurance policy that says you have to notify us within 3 days of this event occurring. I don't know how anybody is supposed to know that there's an underground leak for a small operator down in rural South Texas when this guy's got
Yeah,
maybe 150 wells. I mean, it's an impossible provision, right? And it's
right.
kind of a fraudulent provision, in my opinion. In that scenario, that company is up the creek because that insurance company is not providing a defense. You know, um,
Would you recommend? So I hear some guys that like mostly, I guess I've heard of it from crane operators where they carry their own insurance policy. Is that something you're familiar with? And would you kind of recommend that? Like you have your company's insurance potentially, but carrying your own insurance. What are your thoughts on that?
insurance is kind of a complex game, right? So, you might not even be able, if you're working on a site, say as a derrick man, and you're like, well, I'm like way up in the air as a result of being there. Maybe a derrick man could get their own disability coverage because the risk of falling off the platform is so high, right? Um, but could a derrick man carry his own liability insurance when he was working for a company? Like he's an employee of a company. I don't even know if an insurance company would turn around and say, "Yeah, we'll insure you individually, Mr. Derrickman," because I think an insurance company would turn around and say, "Well, you're an employee of a company, a workover rig company, and they have their own insurance, or they should be carrying their own insurance, and if they're not, you shouldn't be working for them." Um, I I know that there's been a new trend maybe in the last 10 years where company men have been forming their own entities, and then the operator will hire a company man, and the company man will be on site, and the company man will have his own entity and his own insurance coverage, and it tends to create an additional layer of liability and control in terms of getting after the operator. So the operator, meaning that the operator can now point to the company man as the one who was responsible for what happened versus the liability being put on the operator themselves. So I think if you've got your own entity, um, you're an owner operator, or you're a crane rigging operator, and you're hired as a contractor, then I would say
Yeah,
certainly get your own coverage. It never hurts to get your own coverage, and you know that at a minimum you can lawyer up, and your insurance company will give you a defense if there's something that happens or goes down. That's on the upside. On the downside is that you've got to pay for that insurance,
yeah,
right?
right.
It's not going to be free, and I don't know that. I mean, maybe you could price it into your rate for the day. I think I think Travis, that's actually a phenomenal idea. I wish
You've
I'd
never
see it
seen
more
it
often.
where the two, well, I'm sure you do see it, but where the insurance, like you have the company's insurance and your insurance, and now they're just going back and forth with each other and not with the defense potentially, or it just makes the whole process longer and more convoluted.
No, I see it all the time. And what'll happen is you've got the MSA, right? So the MSA allows, say three companies on site. You know who's going to pay it out, right? You know who's going to provide the primary defense. You know where all the settlement money is going to come from, right? On the basis of this MSA, this indemnity agreement between the parties. But then oftentimes what'll also happen is we'll have this underlying lawsuit going on with the injury, and then there's a federal court declaratory judgment action that'll get filed where all the insurance companies will sue each other. They'll just get into it, and because of the direction of this injury lawsuit, this case gets filed. This never even existed, but all of a sudden this will get filed because something happened here, and something went south over here where it was supposed to be this guy who's going to pay, but all of a sudden, hey, wait a minute, now it looks like it's going to be this guy that's going to pay, and then they go and sue each other. And interestingly, when that tends to happen, that puts settlement pressure on the underlying injury suit, because now it's like, hey, they're about to get a decision in that federal court real soon, so you plaintiffs better figure out what's going on here pretty quick, because you want the money from insurance company C, and they might be let off the hook, and insurance company A is going to pay you guys nothing, right? So it certainly does happen that way, because insurance companies, their whole goal, they're in the business of selling insurance. They're not in the business of paying it.
Right. Yeah. Retaining revenue.
Right. Exactly. They got to sell as much insurance as possible, and then when you file a claim, they're like, who this? Who's this? I don't know.
Jason who? Travis who?
Yeah. What?
Yeah, no, again, that might be valuable information, or valuable perspective. Just, because you do hear it somewhat frequently with guys that feel like their decisions are going to be more impactful to the people around them. Like I said, the crane operators, their heavy loads, their overhead loads. So I can see in a certain sense why they would carry their own additional policy. Like you said, a company man who's there. I would think they would if they've started their own entity and kind of their own company and they're not being brokered by somebody that, they're going to have their own policy.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it never hurts, but I think that there's a practical aspect of, um, if somebody's not going to pay you extra for carrying that insurance, now it's just going to eat into your bottom line. Um, the practical aspect is I ain't going to carry it. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. Well, cool. How do people get a hold of you? Where can people go and find you? And yeah.
Sure. So if you get online and you search for DeSouza Injury Lawyers, DESOUZA, DeSouza Injury Lawyers, you'll find us. You can click through and contact our intake department if you've got something going on, an injury case that's happened to you. Um, if you're not sure about whether you've been injured, but you're not sure about whether you have a case, you can still call us. Everything gets vetted at our office. We've got internally a central kind of intake message board that I personally participate in. So I'm going to see these things that are going on. It costs nothing to hire us. You can always, if I think there's a case, I usually will get the final say on signing a case. You can always hire us. It's no cost to hire us. We can always get our investigator going. We can always try to get we'll get our intake department going, so we'll get more information from you. Our investigator will get going. And hey, if there's a case there, there's a case. If there's not a case, well, at least you can find out that there's not a case there, or we can't represent you. In which case, we'll just politely send you a declination letter, and we'll go our separate ways.
And you serve what area? Just so people know.
We serve the state of Texas. We're located in South Texas, but we have clients all over the state of Texas. We're located in San Antonio. All of our boards, our billboards, are located across the Eagle Ford, so between Laredo in the west and Corpus Christi in the east. Um, but if somebody's, they're out in West Texas, they've got something going on. We've got cases that are out in Victoria, which is close to Houston. We've got cases up north in Dallas. Um, I've had a few people. One fellow hired me from North Dakota because there was a Texas company operating up there, and I know they do a lot of shale drilling up there in North Dakota. Um, I'm happy. I'm happy to speak to anybody. I enjoy what I do immensely. I think that I really enjoy representing people who do the real work, who get their hands dirty, who are out there powering America, who are doing good work. Um, I'm all for it. I drive big V8s, so I'm buying your product too.
Do you have a phone number handy, just in case
I
that's
sure do.
easier for people?
I sure do. Yeah, our office number is 210-714-4215. 210-714-4215. And you're welcome to call that number. A very nice lady will pick up the phone. She also speaks Spanish, so hablo español, and you could speak to us in English or Spanish, and we'll be happy to speak to you. I've even got one lawyer, he speaks Spanish, English, and French. So if you want to speak some French, if you're from Quebec in Canada, by all means, give us a call if you've got an injury case.